Hi. Well, thank you very, very much, Carlos, for inviting me. Very excited about some of what's been going on. I'm going to be demonstrating some open source software. Basically, we're going to ask what is music for and what does it share with artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence research. Where is weak AI at right now and how does it work? How much of your job can you automate? And it's important to understand what artificial general intelligence is so you can understand the limits of statistical artificial intelligence. I think what I'm trying to do musically today during the demonstration is portray a hypothesis about thinking and language processing. Essentially an iteration of what it sounds like to be in my head. Because I basically think that that's what a lot of pieces are, and that's what a lot of music writing tends to be. And I'll probably be using the royal you a bit more than I should, because I'm probably talking about me, and I might be talking about some anecdotal straw man argument that I'm not really investigating. So trying to take it personally if you hear the royal you used around. But at the same time, maybe use it if you want. The conclusion essentially being that I used to spend hundreds of hours carrying out a plan in some notation system. Because a lot of times a piece you're like, oh, I'm going to do a thing, and then you're just sitting there carrying it out. It's like you had the idea months ago, you're still I don't know, I felt that. So then this makes laziness, right? You make excuses and you make up little lies for yourself to tell you why you're deviating from the plan. So the piece we're going to hear tonight would have been essentially intractable without the software doing what I think is just the clerical stuff, just filling out the format. Was that a...
The door is really
trust. And it's not that the software today even relates to weak AI, it's that it demonstrates a composer deciding what data goes into a system and guiding the interpretation. Because as we'll see, AI is largely about supervision of data sets. So the plan is to total about 20-ish minutes, leaving 30 plus minutes for centralized or decentralized discussion and some strictly technical walkthroughs if anybody is interested in installing the software. So I feel like in a well-defined system, it can be very elegant and perfect to just do a thing correctly. If your piece is multiplication, you'll pretty much know that 324 times 46 equals 14,904. And sometimes this is just too clean and it's too perfect. So that's why I feel in musical systems I'm actually telling lies in order to make a piece longer than 2 seconds. You do things imperfectly and you make mistakes for the drama of it. Now with multiplication, when the 4 times 6 leaves a 4 a 2 in the tens place, you got to arc it up through here, and you're pulling up this 1 from the 4 times 4, arcing it up here as well. And when it's time to cross this out, there's this dramatic crossing out. These are the musical phrases, That's what a musician's really into. That's what a performer can really get behind, is a nice arc through the air like this. And then sometimes, these two numbers are the two results are smashed into each other so that they yield the final result. This process has to be dramatic or else it's not really musical. Now with a calculator, you can do it without any drama whatsoever. It's just done. So I think a piece of music tries to be a snapshot of how you reason about music, essentially, or reasoning about anything. I kind of feel like it's a part of understanding what it sounds like in there, and then you can let other people kind of into your brain. Now, artificial intelligence has been a field of study theoretically for several decades, arguably, and it's about having well-defined models of intelligence. So what can systems or agents do? How do they do it? And this may or may not be approximating the way humans solve problems, the way humans think. The first step is often reverse engineering human intelligence, but that's a very, very small piece of the puzzle. And a lot of models for artificial agents end up with insights about what's really going on with biological agents, because whether or not you think human brains are similar to plausible artificial brains, like, we don't know anything about either of those, so it's kind of up in the air. And it's part of why it's really not an exact science. That's a very important point. So really quick, the field is basically split between artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence. And general intelligence refers to like human level, essentially. Weak AI is where the industry's at right now. That's how you get like your vacuum cleaners and like your cars and everything like that. And some examples of the distinction here is that for a parochially intelligent agent, it learns how to arrange patterns on a desk. This is from IQ tests for children's ages 4 to 7. There's a really good talk on YouTube. This guy Ben Gertzel, very big researcher in the field, explaining how to apply a child's IQ test to a robot. Points out that the really impressive thing would be if the agent could walk into the room, you could tell it to sit in the chair, it figures out what that chair means, looks across the table, the psychologist parses the description of the problem, and then solves the problem. So it's very easy to give a computer a problem in the language of the computer. The tricky part is getting it to parse and infer like the way we talk to each other, essentially. This is another example. Like imagine like a chatbot learning to make convincing small talk. But that very same chatbot would go into another culture and for the technology we have now, there's a lot of retraining time. It has to take a lot of new inputs, think about it. It can be very embarrassing for it to have to switch to a new culture, a new set of like small talk rules. That's a note to myself. This one, this last example is that movie that Wyatt has seen, and I still haven't watched. I've just read the articles about it. They gave it all these sci-fi scripts. It basically parses them, assigns probabilistic information to different types of things, produces a new script, and then they shot it.
Sunspring.
It's called Sunspring.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's pretty good.
It's hilarious.
yeah. So, a appropriately intelligent agent, you can just give it, like, if you give it the whole real book, like, it can, contribute like a new standard, essentially. But what a generally intelligent agent, the merely statistical approach can't do would be like make up a fictional aesthetic, essentially. From an extensible set of input types. That's probably a little more technical than I'll get into. That just means like, I designed the robot to read notes of music, but it can decide for its own if it wants to read the English language. So it's not just having both of those capacities, but it's being able to switch whenever it wants to. That's what the extensible thing means. Basically a list of terms dominating weak AI that you'll see if you read think piece headlines. You hear about machine learning. This is indistinguishable from data science. Data science is like a pretty heavy buzzword for the marketing types, but it's the same thing as machine learning. Neural networks is a general like form of deep learning that gets a lot of airtime these days. Has a lot different between that and data science, but they share similar limitations because they are built upon and subject to the contentious and ill-defined practices of probability and statistics. It's totally an open problem how to talk about probability and statistics. There's fiery debates. There's Like there's psychology departments who can't replicate results from any of their papers. So people are starting to wonder if any psychology actually works, and like this is a matter of statistical methodology. So very contentious, and exciting place full of contradictions here. But that's essentially the limits of. It stopped. Next. That zoomed in, great. Boom. This is an example. This is the Mario with deep neural nets. No, not deep, just neural nets. Basically, like it'll collide with something and that'll send information to some node, and it'll eventually learn to like jump at the right time. This is a video on YouTube. You can find it. Totally good watch. Totally makes sense even if you don't have a lot of computer science experience. Essentially, it takes like that Mario dies like this one's around 1,000 times before he beats the level. So that's really what it's about. A net, in this case, builds up a corpus of failures, and then it reads, it analyzes the failures to develop a better policy, and eventually it'll, it wins. Oh, now it's going backwards. I don't even know how to. This is AlphaGo. Maybe you heard of this. Go is the oldest board game in the world. Very simple set of rules, but it took until earlier this year for a computer to beat the best human. This was again, backed by Google. They had an algorithm that doesn't have to be very advanced, but they feed it a lot of games. It learns the whole history of the famous pro games. It plays against itself, and that's how it learns. Why does Google beat the best in the world? Because Google has the largest servers, the most power and time to run the simulation. So statistical learning basically comes down to who has the largest and best data sets, who has the most processing power. It's about what agents can perform with the least amount of training time or trials. And this is what I wanted to note about the Mario thing. This video game subfield is a very big deal in AGI. And the crucial thing is level 2, essentially. You might be able to, if me and Wyatt are in a competition, Wyatt's agent might not be able to keep up with my agent on level 1. But then on level 2, my agent will take 1,000 trials to learn level 2, and Wyatt's agent will take 500 trials to learn level 2. So sometimes really powerful agents on easier levels can't learn higher levels, and sometimes the ones that are better at higher levels are slower on each level. So that's kind of the challenge. Basically. Enormous question. Who is collecting and annotating data sets? This is like where you get the politics of it. I'm not even going to tell you about this article I read about the designers and data analysis who are collaborating with the NYPD right now to work on like automating like crime fighting stuff. It's like that's where you get the dystopian stuff. Is that who? But this process of collecting and annotating data sets, people can really learn how to do. So I mean, that's kind of what needs to be made accessible. When people talk about democratizing AI, it's about the data sets mostly, and we have a paradigm of private data sets, but like there hasn't really been a data commons really. Oh, I have someone who's...
That's it?
Yeah. Oh, it's Tiago. Oh, my friend Tiago. Yeah. It changed rooms.
Yeah, tell him 126.
So yeah, agents are... Oh, hey, how are you?
Hey, good.
to see you. There's someone else. This was If you can, they might be wandering around somewhere. I don't know if they've been to Temple. About my height, a guy, a little bit of facial hair. So yeah, but the role of the annotator of the data, I think, is what's very important. So we tend to think that some jobs are headed toward automation, but that other jobs aren't. In music composition, we'll certainly offload the most tedious and clerical stuff to software, but we need ourselves to still make decisions. See, this is where things get interesting. I don't think anybody would want to really cling to the quill pen and the copying thing, except insofar as like getting a job with an older composer, like you heard about they did hundreds of years ago. I totally would have had that job, copying for an older composer, but that's gone because of Finale Sibelius. Notation has to be understood as a form of automation, even though we never think of it in terms of the kind of automation that comes with artificial intelligence. So there's I guess with three newcomers, I guess I'll do a short review of what went over. Basically, the field of artificial intelligence is very statistically dominated right now, and that basically means that it goes back to essentially like power and like having large data sets, having a lot of processing power. And it hasn't necessarily advanced the kinds of decisions that can be, put to machines. And so, just lastly, this is a imaging idea that I got from this guy named Gary Marcus, who was this keynote speaker at an AGI conference last summer. Basically said that we have this local limit of, AI performance, and then we have, really human-level AI. So if this was, human-level AI, this is where AlphaGo happens, which is early this year, might be essentially as far as the statistical paradigm could take us. This could be decades of people being very bored and uninterested in AI before we come back up again with better methodologies. We get Skynet, Ultron, really powerful human-level general intelligence. And I put the last death by car accident here. The statistical paradigm should be able to get us no more human drivers. But yeah, this could be decades. This could be a lack of funding. But it could also be 5 years, or some people think it could be 2 minutes. Because you never really know. And there's totally doomy kind of people in the field, apocalyptic, the end is near, we have to prepare for AI. It's a blast. It's a fun to read about. So that's basically the setup there for technology. And again, this software I'm going to demonstrate is really nothing to do with weak AI, but I think it demonstrates the role of tools in a way that's actually similar to the way AI was used. And you can look at neural net programs for artists, not super powerful open source accessibility right now, but I don't know. You might think that some of their methodology way of thinking is the same, because I guess where do you factor in the technology in your process, I guess, is the main question. So like I said, I think music can be a lot around getting people to the inside of your head and just thinking about how it's just thinking about sound and how syllables turn into words. I wonder this stuff all the time, and if it's spatially thought of or so I don't know. It's how would you get inside the brain, essentially? And we know what people think because of what they say, right? how would natural language relate to the chopped up part of the thoughts? Because I think there's a section of thought that's just super chopped up before it can turn into language. There might be a lot going on. So I'm going to record a monologue. It's going to be totally normal. Like, you'll hear the words and it'll, and then I'm going to record some other stuff, and then I'm going to break up the other stuff and map it onto the monologue with like analyzing like the frequencies and the volumes and the intensities with this really cool software called AudioGuide developed by this guy named Ben Hackworth. So if you'll just give me 5 seconds, feel free to ask any questions while we're here. Check, check, check. This is from King Lear. Some act, some scene, something. Edmund. I've always loved this monologue. I'm not going to get into that. This is the excellent foppery of the world, that when we are sick in fortune, often the surfeit of our own behavior, we make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon, and the stars, as if we were villains by necessity, fools by heavenly compulsion, knaves, thieves, and treacherous by spherical predominance, drunkards, liars, and adulterers by an enforced obedience of planetary influence, and all that we are evil in by a divine thrusting on, an admirable evasion of man, to lay his goatish disposition to the charge of a star. My father compounded with my mother under the dragon's tail, and my nativity was under Ursa Major, so that it follows I am a rough and a lecherous. Tut I should have been that I am, had the maidenliest star in the firmament twinkled on my bastardizing. That was a minute. Here was that USB cable. So unfortunately you can't see what's about to happen, but I will walk you through it, and we can totally do like, some other time, I think more like one-on-one or something if you're not that comfortable with like command line stuff and going over like getting it installed. It's a library for C sound.
Would it be worth it if we all just went right behind your shoulder?
Yeah, do you want to? I think that's totally cool to the extent that people can fit. But that's totally cool. Oh wait a minute. I should probably. No, I should. I'm gonna record the second part before. We'll record the second part before because I get to dump the files and stuff is a whole process. So, excuse me, that was gonna take. No, sorry, is anybody into like gibberish and like nonsense?
Yeah.
You want to record some?
Anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to produce some nonsense, some real, some real salad here, you can just think all across the spectrum.
What do you want? Okay. Let's do
That's
it.
recording.
Shamaninu, Hedle, Klitlu, Shimbab Lulu, Tip Kulu, Kapuru, Chup, Nam Chip, Yam Lo, Flip Shimla, Tip Kapuru, Shim, Tom, Pom, Pom, Tom, Keg, Yo, No, Chip, Clip, 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 Do Chip, Lam, Do Clip, Clip, Oh, you, Do, Clip, Do Papa Boo, Whip, Big You, Clip,
Awesome. Fantastic. We're gonna get some more. I can do more. We'll use all of it. Yeah.
Oh, you have my skull in my upper bag.
Thank you, guys.
Now do we look behind your shoulder?
Yes. I am going to reboot the device.
I found that.
That's good.
There's a bunch of really cool posters in there.
Is it yours?
Now it is.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Alright, so
Yeah.
the software is called Audio Guide. This is essentially where you give it commands, but it goes deep into this library called C Sound, which is like a pretty raw like driver and what do you call it? An audio engine down in C, but it does the arranging of like and scheduling of data in Python. And I'm going to go over in here and take these out, or whatever folder they're in this folder. Boom. And I'm going to name them. This is going to be, oh wait, just time. All right. It's going to be source. Yeah. I guess source. Target 1 and target 2. Wait, not just 2, I mean. And we're going to, let me take this. So this is the command to do the segment script. I'm going to have it segment the src.wave. And I've come into here. This is called terminal if you've never been in it. And the language you use is called bash. It's used in any Linux server. And just give it the command here. What did I do? Oh. C audio guide with dash 1.1.4. Oh, because I put it in, okay. Then we do CD examples, and then we do this. What? It's right there. Oh wait, no, I was wrong. I need to do CD dot, and I need to do example slash, then copy it. Boom. All right. So it's segmented the file. It said it found 217 statements, and it looks like this. It has like a start time and end time of a segment. They're very small. I mean, they're mostly less than like a fifth of a second. And like some information about it's triggered, some information about blah, blah, blah.
What is it defining of a segment?
What are you defining of a segment?
How does it, what is a segment?
This is a really important part. it's reading like onset, like how quickly the sound comes in, how it decays. It marks it volume, so it marks it like the different volume levels. It has some other like intensity parameter somewhere. And then and that's really important because there really is quite a bit of art to that. Wait, what's the syntax to have two targets again? Let me try to remember. Great. So I'm going to have two targets. Wait a minute. It's going to be, one's going to be, no, two corpuses. It's going to be target one.wave and target two.wave and wait a minute. Oh, I totally did source and target backwards in this initial thing. What I really mean is there were one target and two corpuses. Corpo. src.wave. Save that. And then I'm going to, I think this is going to work. All right, it didn't work. Examples, tg1.wave, that's because I didn't spell something right. tgt1, all right, command S, and, all right, so it'll work. I need to do the segmentation file for all of them, duh. So I'm going to go in here, tgt1, more segmentation files, works fine, tgt2, there we go. So my targets had 150 segments and 148 segments. My source had 217 segments. Several reasons why sometimes the result can sound like it's using the same segments over and over again, but that's one of them. So now I feel totally confident.
It's not gonna be loud as fuck.
Not loud as fuck. No, I kind of tested it. This isn't that loud. If it's still on. It also like
It's
goes.
like shy of loud as fuck. I can definitely use
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you want to call it?
So that's what, I don't know what you guys want to call it. I mean, it's totally up to you. So here's what it sounds like with both at once.
This is the excellent flattery of the world, that when we are sick in fortune, and the surfeit of our own behavior, we make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon, and the stars, as if we were villains by necessity, fools by heavenly compulsion, knaves, thieves, and treacherous by spherical predominance, drunkards, liars, and adulterers by enforced obedience or planetary influence, and all that we are evil in by a divine thrusting on, an admirable evasion of man, to lay his goatish disposition to the charge of a star. My father compounded with my mother under the dragons title. My nativity was under Ursa Major, so that it follows I know enough for lectures. Tut, I should have been, but I had been made me a star in the firmament, twinkled on my bastard eye.
Is there like an element of convolution that's going beyond that? I mean,
Convolution?
yeah, I get that. Convolution is like imparting one signal onto another signal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's all those settings.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, here I told it to have a maximum number of segments at once. It's 5. So if there was a really loud sound in the target file, it would have pulled from everywhere, pulled to however much it needed to. I mean, you could try to recreate a really loud target with only really soft sound, things like that. If you can go in and edit like the way it annotates, you can actually get a lot more control. You can say like, less gradualness, because like all those sounds were like fade in, faded out, even the microsecond ones. So like if you wanted something real like, you could totally go in there and edit it.
So those are the more of the. This is where like more of the traditional composer decisions are made.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like you get tons of room for decisions. Like you could say that if I wanted to do this piece, but I had to manually chop up those audio files and find things to match. If I could do that manually, I would cheat, and that cheating would be creativity, and that's why humans are composers, is because they cheat, and that's what makes them creative. That's all well and good. If you're into that, it's all well and good. But you can have a very composerly decision-making position, even without having to do everything manually. All this like boring, tedious stuff manually.